This is Robert, who was on his bike nearly 30 years ago, cycling the wrong way up Brick Lane, and we've got another bike here for him to do the same thing, and we're going to recreate the photograph now, if that's all right with you. My first actual camera was a box camera. I can remember it very vividly. It was black and it was second-hand. My mother gave it to me, and I remember putting the film into it the first time. And I remember the smell of the inside of the case and having to look down like that at the viewfinder at the top. So that was my first camera, a second-hand box camera. I always regarded the street as a kind of theatre. It's endlessly fascinating. And I'm interested in the way people interact with the environment that they're in. You've got to remember that in poorer areas, the street is a very important extension of people's homes, because there's not enough space at home to meet and greet and have intercourse. You have to go out on the street to meet people. And the children go out on the street to play. And they make their own play adventures in the environment, the surrounding environment, because people are living often in overcrowded conditions. So the street, actually, if you analyse it properly, is the home of thousands of people. I feel as if I'm being invited into people's homes when I'm photographing on the street, because there's so much going on there. That's the way I look at my role as a street photographer, and you have to have a lot of respect for the people that you're photographing. Often they don't know you're photographing them. Mostly they don't know that you're photographing them, and you have to be careful how you use those photographs.
Well, we're delighted to welcome Phil Maxwell, a dear friend of the Institute. We're absolutely honoured to look after Phil's photographic archive here. And tonight we're going to be doing what we call a modern magic lantern show. You'll notice there's not a magic lantern. Our version of a modern magic lantern is a PowerPoint, which may be a bit of a disappointment to some of you, but it's nearly there anyway. And we've got quite a lot of pictures to look at tonight.
40 altogether.
We normally say 20, but because it's Phil, we let him have 40.
One of the great things about photography is that things happen that you don't expect. it's a question of luck. And I was just photographing the backs of these tenements in Fieldgate Mansions, and I could hear these children running down the alleyway, which is to the extreme right of the photograph. You know, I could hear their voices, and all of a sudden the little boy popped out and was shocked to see me there with my camera, so I just snapped him. I learnt the craft of street photography on my own, going out to places like Toxteth in Liverpool. I would have a SLR camera, single lens reflex camera, around my neck, just walking around arbitrarily all over the place, and inevitably what happened is that kids would stop you and ask you to take their photographs, and obviously you obliged them. I remember on one occasion I went to this housing estate which has now been demolished. It was demolished in the early 1980s, called Carl Gardens, and I must have been there for about no longer than 20 minutes, but there was a bunch of kids in the estate who were playing on their bikes and on the swings and everything. So once they saw me, they were interested in the camera and said, "Can you take my picture? Can you take our picture?" So I did take their pictures. And I put all of those photographs, which were taken over 30 years ago, nearly 40 years ago now, onto my website, and I discovered on Facebook a blog about Carl Gardens. So I did a link from there to my blog, and subsequently I now know the names of all of those children that I photographed. There's about 90 comments on my blog from those children, all people who knew them, and reminiscing about life in the Carl Gardens before it was demolished in the 1980s. And this is the wonder of photography. It evokes memories for people. I had no idea all those years ago, when I was on that housing estate taking photographs of those children, that it would all be resurrected in 30 odd years' time. Because they would see those photographs all those years later on the internet and get in touch with me. So it's marvellous. I think I've always had a love affair with the East End. So I never really said when I first moved, I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. It's just so happened that I've spent the majority of my life in the East End. And as a photographer, I find it eternally fascinating. There's always something new going on, and there's a vibe about the place which is wonderful. I'm very fortunate because I've been able to go all around the world and take photographs. But whenever I come back to the East End, I always find in the East End itself something of the place that I've left behind thousands of miles away. If you look at the East End and its history, it's always been a place of immigration. So you've had the Jews, the Huguenots, the Bangladeshis, Somali people coming and living and making the East End their home. And often they've been coming here to improve their life, and they've been running away from oppression. And that creates a particular dynamic in society, which I've always been fascinated by. And if you remember in 1936, when Mosley and his fascist black shirts tried to march through East London, the Jewish community, the white working class community, Christians and everyone else, they all came to stop the black shirts from marching down into Cable Street. So there's always been a tradition of fighting prejudice and racism in the East End. There were lots of demonstrations, counter-demonstrations, against the poison of fascism on Brick Lane. And I've always thought that it's the responsibility of photojournalists to capture the opposition to fascism and to record that, because opposition to fascism and racism is an integral part of our history and culture, and it needs to be recorded. Having taken a lot of anti-racist photographs of protest in and around Brick Lane in the 80s and even in the early 90s, the National Front, who later became the British National Party, used to stand at the top of Brick Lane and sell their appalling literature, and made it my business to photograph them. What happened on these Sundays is that if anybody turned up to protest against the National Front, they were put on the other side of the road. So you weren't allowed by the police to go over. And so I was quite insistent to photograph the National Front, and the police took exception to that. And so I was arrested and carted off to Bethnal Green, Nick. And there I am. When you're a street photographer, you're telling a truth about society. This is what society is about. The reality of people's lives. It might include poverty, it might include happiness, it might include oppression, protest, but you're telling a truth, I think, which is an antidote to what we get in the mainstream media. And that's why I do what I do, because we're not really told the truth about what is happening in society. So I think the street tells you a lot about what's going on in society, and that's why I photograph it, and that's why I celebrate it. I always come back to where my heart is, and that is the street and the ordinary people on the street. And I'm always moved and motivated by people on the street. Well, I don't think I could operate as a human being if it wasn't for my photography. My photography is an extension of myself. It's the way I express myself. It's the way I attempt to understand the world that I live in. And it's the way that I give back something to the world. So photography for me means everything. I don't know how I could function if I wasn't a photographer. I feel very responsible to use that skill for the benefit of other people and to capture lives and stories that I feel passionate about and need to be preserved. So that's my life really, and that's what I continue doing. That's it.